Bonjour à tous, ça va?
Good morning, everybody. I hope you're fine. Okay? I'm asking whether you're all right. Is everything okay? So something is happening, really. I was told it was going to start at 10:30, and I just looked at the program, and it starts at 10. So anyway, I'm in charge, so don't worry. I'll look after you. Take your smartphones. You'll be able to use them during our sessions, and I'm going to ask you, we're going to show you what you have to do on the screen. Can we have the internet address of our site? You've all got your smartphones, okay? I'm sure you all know that application. You go to app.claxo.com, which you can see there. Do that. Go on the site, and once you're there, you enter the code. We don't choose that. They sort of automatically generate, which you can see written here. Are you connected? Can you raise your hand if you are? One. Not a bad start then. 60% of our audience has to be connected before we actually start. So get your smartphones and connect to app.claxo.com. And then do that again with the access code. So Noémie and François are here. You can give them a round of applause. Thank you. They're going to be in charge of you during the morning. I'm going to ask questions. We're going to think about the various themes together on super local, that theme, and they'll be there to actually pick on what you've done. How many people are connected now? It's 40 or so people are connecting. But there are many more of you than that, so 50, 200, you'll get a bonus, François. Go ahead. Connected? Connecting now. So during this morning session, we're going to use this application regularly to ask questions and ask for your opinion for, as to what we're talking about and what your reactions are and what your comments are. So it'll be up to you. I'll give you the green light. You'll see it's dead easy, but I'm sure you're already using that quite frequently, so it's not a problem. François, how many are connecting? 145. Good. I need at least 200. There are many more of you than that, so I need at least 200. Connect very quickly. Our guests are coming. For those of you who are here, you go to that site. Enter the code. Please leave that on the screen. Here it is, yeah, big letters. And then we'll ask you for your email, family name, etc. And then you'll be connected with us. 200? Oh, fantastic. There are lots of messages already. So it means that you've already seen a specific functionality. There's an icon at the bottom on which you can click to send immediate messages, questions, reactions as to what you're listening to during our plenary session. So can you actually visualize what's happening there as far as the questions are concerned? Hello, Anthony. All sorts of silly things are being said. So anyway, just try to moderate your language, but it's just a warming up session. So hello, Jean-Michel. Hello, Gabriel. Hi, Agnès. My neighbor, the person sitting next to me, comes from Dubai. No ties this year. So we had a meeting last night with the World Forum president, and he said that nobody should wear a tie on this session. Hi, Teresa. Fine, all sorts of little messages like that. Fascinating, as you can hear. You'll be able to use that connection whenever you feel like it. As I said, we'll be here till about 12:30. Send your comments, and there's another functionality. You can actually like a number of messages. You can put see, that way we'll be able to see the number of likes that some messages have. Hello, Jean-Claude, that you might send us. Of course, Jean-Claude has got many likes. There's always one who says, yeah, well, we're not connected between us with that klaxon. So this morning from 8 to 10, there are 150 businesses who got connected via klaxon to actually exchange about the Rev 3 theme. But I mean, anyway, now with our guests from all over the world, ISEN are here. Les ISEN sont présents. The ISENs are here. François, can we see the first question? With klaxon, we can do clouds of words. The theme of this world is super local. And we'd like to ask you, and you'll see that on the screen, and the session will open very soon. We wanted to ask you in one word. You can only put one word, at least one word at a time. Super local, for you, what does it mean? Just one word. What is it? Send you your comments, your ideas, and we'll see them. Food, neighborhood. The more the word is quoted, and the more it'll appear in big letters on the screen. So after about 10 minutes, you should feel like vomiting or being sick if you really focus on that cloud, because it's rather your eyes are being put at stress. So we can also have word matches. So neighborhood, near, local, cooperation, future. So send one word to qualify what you think about superlocal, which is the theme of the 2018 World Forum. So you can click. You've got a little icon with that says ideas. If you want to put a number of likes next to some certain words, you can also do that. You click on ideas, you go on the list of words. I've got that on the screen here. It's great, isn't it? How many items have we got? You're rather fast, aren't you? Maybe we can put the code back for people who've just arrived, the access code, to be able to connect. So neighborhood, short circuits, CSR, local, future, ecosystem. I think we're exploring the ecosystem for the Hauts-de-France, for this département. We'll see what it means now for the rest of the regions of the world. Sustainability, of course. It's fantastic, this cloud, isn't it? We've got 2 or 3 more minutes. President isn't here, so anyway, we can't start until he gets here, so we're safe. I'm waiting for the other guests too. More comments? Is there anything new in the messages that you're getting? The messages, you can be connected in real time, of course. Comments, remarks, observations to the speakers that we're going to have in a few seconds. So do not hesitate. Right, so you can also send pictures. So we have a little hello from Strasbourg. I'll tell you a bit later, but we're also being watched via streaming in the whole world. And there are 2 towns in France, Strasbourg and Nantes, have gathered a number of business people, entrepreneurs, local officials, and they'll be with us. And throughout the morning, we'll also ask them questions, and they'll be able to react, comment, and make their observations on the super local themes that we'll be tackling this morning. Some are in Paris, and Rob Hopkins will make will develop that pun on permaculture, I'm sure. You're not super late. Oh, no, I was told that we'll start at 10:30, so that's fine, don't worry. There's a lot sharing, of course, which is the DNA of the World Forum. Cooperation they creep up very often. There are also sort of words in French. If you send it in English, you get it in English, don't you? Yes, of course. But it's essentially French. Are there words that we shouldn't put? I think that sort of participatory production, vegetable garden, business. I'm just looking now on the margins. Abundance, understanding. Jules, which is a name. Village, survival, store, super design, reasoning. Well, as long as it's moving, it means that things are doing well. If you're sending words, then that's great. It means the whole system is working well. Some are really having a great time with the messages, aren't they? Forgot to say that the messages will be, there'll be a surcharge for every message, of course. It's not true, of course. Mobivia is here. Welcome. They're in listening, decarbonated. There's a lot, there's food for thought there, isn't there? In all these words that we can see cropping up now. CO2. I give you one more half a minute, and then we'll stop this. I think we've got quite a nice picture of what you've just thought about, basically, of your cloud of thoughts and catchwords. And then we'll be able to officially open the 2018 World Forum. For those of you who've just arrived, can you display the code? Maybe there's an appli that you know, maybe Klaxoon. Do connect to it, and throughout the morning we'll ask you questions, not necessarily wanting to make a cloud of ideas, and might be other exercises, so to speak. So as you will see on the right-hand side of that screen, you can also send us messages constantly. They're your comments, your questions, your reactions, and we'll try to deal with them. You can also put likes on it if you agree with what somebody has said. Well, you can like that topic that's been highlighted by one person. Shall we stop the cloud now? Can we see it on the screen again? And whilst you're doing this, that's a little thought for Monsieur Vasseur. You're all here, and now we can open the 2018 World Forum.
De l'économie responsable est né en 2007 dans le nord de la France. Son but est de faire connaître les bonnes pratiques des entreprises qui, partout dans le monde, exercent leurs activités de façon responsable afin que leur exemple soit contagieux. Depuis 2007, chaque édition aborde les dernières tendances de l'économie responsable. thématiques précises sont abordées. L'économie responsable est une source intarissable de sujets. Pendant plusieurs jours, dirigeants d'entreprises,
several days, businesses, communities, students participate in sessions. 5,000 participants take part. 100 or so different speakers share their experience. That's what ensures the success of the World Forum. Réseau Alliance is behind the organization of this event. CSR is at the back, is in its DNA. It's a partner of the Global Compact and the Global Reporting Initiative, and also member of CSR Europe and the National CSR Platform. The World Forum provides tools throughout the year to actually spread good practices. This is the case of BP's, the International Platform of CSR Good Practices. World Forum has actually sponsored Sobeys Hub and the Third Industrial Revolution. It's an actor, it's a main contender in that particular revolution. So join us, become you too an actor of this world change and World Forum. Philippe Vasseur, the president of the World Forum, is here. Welcome, Mr. President. Do you remember your first one? Yes, 12 years ago. 12 years, yeah. We started quite, gingerly with the help of all the partners of the region. We wouldn't have been able to do it if we hadn't had the regional council, businesses, local businesses helping us. Throughout the years, over these 12 editions, we've been able to explore, exchange, and build on various sort of points or topics about this responsible economy. What is interesting is to go back in time, basically, and we'll see that the themes that we chose were actually in tune with the topic events. When we hadn't spoken about the sustainability, we hadn't actually predicted that Lehman Brothers would happen. So we thought that maybe we're still slightly ahead. We think that what will play a role in basically in that economy of the future is this idea of territory, this theme, our current theme, the super local. Well, we faced with a globalized world. We can also, we've actually delved into that throughout the various world fora. And also this event has been able to have a number of people from throughout the world. Maybe there's a certain, compared to globalization, you say, well, we're going to try and focus on the mechanics of the local aspect. It's not the local against global, because it's wrong to see things in that light. We're in a world that's globalized, where at any time I can communicate with someone who's in Australia, Africa, Chile. The problem is that in everyday life, in what I do every day, where can I be most efficient? And that's where I can have links with people who might share the same concerns as me. And we can see increasingly that in what we call advanced countries, advanced in some aspects and rather sort of lagging behind in other aspects, people are just making local their own, so to speak. Danone is a brand, a world brand, for example. Danone has been actually used in all the languages of the world. Faber said there was a return to the local, and the major part of his development actually was rooted in local brands in a region. Another example, we have a dual culture. We like beer and we like wine. We say there's a region. Normally it's a discriminator. we've also got champagne, actually. No, but we don't actually produce, we do produce a lot of beer, not so much wine. I don't know whether you've noticed in the past decades, you've seen that there's been a merging all the various brewers and some brewers installed. There were a few that were medium-sized that were there, but we were not in basically sort of spreading that movement. And just look at what's happening now in sort of locally made beers. There are something like 1,000 brewers with which the larger brewers deal with, not necessarily, but that's also, let's say that it's, you can say that there's a reverse trend, and this reverse trend corresponds to what we call the local addict or local suppliers, local sourcing. That is a reality. And we have to see how you can basically draw from that and develop it and anchor it even more deeply. So in the coming days, we'll basically analyze this movement, this sort of pendulum that brings back the creation of new business models. But here again, I don't think we should turn in terms of antagonism.
S'approprie les choses sur le territoire.
Yes, we should make our own on the territory, yes, but complementary, in a complementary way. So what kind of milestone could you give us, like the players of those business models, the companies on the territories? What are they? Well, a company, in theory, has customers and clients. Without them, we cannot last long. Otherwise, it's a public service. But a company has clients and customers, and you find them around yourself. If a large Japanese company, automaker, has set up here, it's not because they wanted to please us. It's because they've got, of course, a nice place to set up, but also because they have a local market. If I have no market, what's the point of going there? And then there's another type of problem, another type of issue for the company. What is the impact of the company on the territory? We can see the impact of the territory on the company. I can find on this territory customers, skills, structures, infrastructure. But I think we should revert that question. What will the company provide to the territory in terms of added value, obviously? But I'm only starting this debate has opposed Nobel Prizes of economy. I'm part of the people who think that a company should make money, make a profit, but it's not the only mission of the company. It has a part of responsibility on the state of the planet today. And I'm just amazed to see that we can have major symposiums like COP21, 180 countries signed it, and then the result is today only 9 have started implementing the commitments taken. So if we wait like this, we'll have major catastrophes ahead of us. And the company can have a part of the responsibility there. It should work in that area. And you have companies that are distinguished, and we'll talk about it during this forum with all the B Corp approach. It shows that a company can be virtuous, and that way can also conquer a new part or a new clientele. So the company is not only for profit. We've seen that evolving over the years. We still need profit. I mean, let's be clear about it. Yes, but there are other purposes. Okay, so since we mustn't be antagonistic between local and global, major brands, how can they get out of this? Well, the major world brand, it's only the beginning of this forum, but you have global brands that try to disseminate their brand all over the planet. It works for a number of products. If you take the car industry, you have makes that are prestigious all over the world. And then you have major companies. I was talking about Danone earlier on. I could mention others. major companies that actually stick to the territories on which they are, and then you don't consume the same way in Moscow, in Tokyo, Paris, or Johannesburg. And therefore, they have a know-how that is translated locally with local brands. I'll just give you an example. You have here, in this area, a major brewery of a major brand that I will not mention today because I don't want to advertise for them, but this international brand that you can find over the world, including on football stadiums abroad, had acquired a brewery here, including the brand Pelfort, and Pelfort had fallen unused. And now they are using Pelfort again because it's connected to a past, to a history, a local grounding. So you can be a major global company and have a local translation that sticks to the field. So for these logics, local logics to work, it's a powerful game. The territories, all the stakeholders, the residents, super local needs commitment, doesn't it? Yes, on a territory we can have the capacity to gather all the players. So the more you are in a dimension that is a higher dimension, the more the worlds tend to be separated. On the territory, I can see it here actually, on this territory, politics meet economy, university academics meet all the players. You can create. I don't like the ecosystem, the words like that we use left, right, and center. But still, we can create communities which are true communities. A community of interest, would you say? Yes, and also a community of destiny. When you're in a territory, otherwise, you could say that you move every other year, but otherwise you stick on the territory. I'll give you an example of what's going to happen here this afternoon. This afternoon, as I mentioned earlier with the representative of the territories, this afternoon we are going to sign a protocol of an agreement, a draft agreement between all the universities, the Chamber of Commerce here in this area, the major business schools around this dynamics of the third industrial revolution. So on a project, a territory, we can create really communities of destiny. It's never happened before. It is the first time that we manage to gather all the people. It doesn't mean that we're going to close ourselves into this area. Beyond that, we can develop partnerships with international universities. So let us be strong, let us develop synergy, let us try and cross all the skills, whether political, economic, or academic, and we'll be stronger to open up to the world. I have two quick questions to ask you. I was thinking about what you were saying about the COP or COP21 effect or non-effects without being antagonistic here. Does this superlocal mean a failure of the states and the superstates? Well, no. When you're talking about the states, you have to look around us. We have a specific vision of the state in France, a very Jacobin type of Franco-French vision. If you look slightly north of here, they have a different concept in Germany. In Germany, they have a different concept. If you look at India, it's still different. I don't think it's the failure of the state. No, I think it's the question we can raise is that of the role of the state. From one country to the next, it varies, but the state cannot do everything and should not do everything, because there are things that you do better where you are, but there are major functions that the state should fulfill. We need the state, we need a strong state, but respectful of the territories and respectful of the initiatives as they happen on the field. It is a redefinition of the role of the state that we have to face in all countries in Europe, actually. But I'm not in favor of disappearing states. We have our histories, we have our institutions. We have to keep them, but we must be more respectful of what is happening on the field. So this afternoon, we will touch on it because with the European Commissioner who has Sefcovic has got things to say. So, super local, that's our theme for 2018. Many nationalities will take part in these 3 working days. The 5 continents will be represented, actually. So I think it's a record-breaking number of attendance. You'll give us the actual figures later on this week. But what can the World Forum produce that would be interesting for the territories and the planet? The characteristic of the World Forum is that we try and do the exact opposite of what I'm doing now, is that to have as few keynote as we can. We want the speakers to show us examples. I mean, saying that it's nice, saying is nice, but doing is much more difficult. What we want to present is our experience all over the world. They're saying that that territory has succeeded in there, and why couldn't I do the same thing here? So we want to get inspired by each other. That's one of the main characteristics of this territory. And we'll see this afternoon, we've launched from the World Forum what we called at the time the Third Industrial Revolution. Now it's called Rev 3 for a number of reasons. That's what we called it in this region, when we develop and continue developing an experiment from the ideas we developed in the World Forum, and we put them into practice on the territory, and we hope it's going to be exemplary. And we are inspired by what is done in other regions, as we'll see this afternoon, in the world and in Europe. So sharing experiments, sharing experience, showing what the successes are, and sometimes showing the failures so we don't have the same failures, is really the DNA of the World Forum. So analyzing, sharing, and then going forward and saying that let's do it together. Well, thank you very much. Have a nice World Forum. Because the World Forum, as we said in the first sequence of your speech, is supported by major loyal partners, but also the condition for their participation is that they also commit and share the commitments. And we're going to listen to the main 3 partners of this World Forum. Thank you, Philippe Vasseur. One of the conclusions of COP21 was to say that reaching the global and objectives would be through a local commitment. And EDF is one of the French players that illustrate the commitment of responsible group locally. Because we are engaged in the energy all over the world through renewable energy and nuclear energy. So we have electricity that is decarbonated and also be the first producer in Europe of renewable energy. We also serve territories, and this is 10,000 employees that accompany the energy transitions through the local authorities as well. So this is what super local is the competence to serve the territories. Good morning, everyone. AG2R La Mondiale is proud to be a premium partner from the origin of this World Forum. And for the second edition, 12th edition, sorry, the great theme of super local. And it is a theme that is close to my heart, and the group is built around this idea of respecting all the members, all the components. And this has led us to introducing AG2R La Mondiale as the group of the territories. And they are very important. And since La Mondiale was created here in 1905 in Lille, and it's still a catchment area for employment. Same for Marseille with Prime Alliance, and tomorrow it will be Rouen with our partnership with Matmut and other groups. And we could mention other major cities in our country. So why is this territory important? Because I believe it is the source of attractiveness, of development, quality of life at work, and it is an essential networking between the state and the whole world. So the whole world are territories that will fashion our country and its development. So the territories are at the heart of economic development, of living together. I have no doubt that exchanges will feed this reflection and again the debates. So I wish you a great forum. BNP Paribas has been a partner of the World Forum for 3 years because we share the conviction that faced with the social and environmental urgencies of today, all the economic players should act and be engaged. For a fairer, more sustainable growth should be a priority for everyone. And we have a role to play in building our business models, combining financial performance and positive impact for society. The theme this year of and companies and territory is especially close to my heart. When you manage a bank network, the action is built at the heart of the territories that we are. It is a local anchoring, a contribution to the dynamics of this territory and its attractiveness. They are part of the same priority. Everywhere in the regions, BNP Paribas employees are engaged to encourage the creation of companies, help SMEs grow, or social partners, or help support the associations that are essential to favor social inclusion. And we are currently finishing a reorganization of our network that goes through the appointment of 170 territory directors to reinforce this closeness with the local partners and contribute more actively to the vitality of the territories. It is true that the current growth creates a real social and environmental urgency. No company, no country, no citizen can win in a losing environment. This is why the BNP Paribas Group has had a marked culture of responsibility, and we've intensified that by creating the Company Engagement Department. We are convinced that collective progress will come from a more sustainable shared growth, and we consider it is our duty to contribute to a better future. This decision marks our determination to have a positive impact by putting the social and environmental challenges like energy transition or the inclusion of young people, put that at the heart of our activity. So we have no cookie-cutter solutions, but we want to be part of the solution, and we want to converge on a daily basis, support the social partners, community associations through policies, sponsoring and entrepreneurial. And we want to want all the stakeholders to meet because we know them well in our daily jobs. And this is the collective and concrete action on the field that will change the world. The company as a whole is probably a decisive player in building a better world. You may have observed these verbatim of these major witnesses that explain the position of the companies. No antagonism in what we've heard. And at the same time, I could hear a better world, the inclusion. All this is expressed there. A warm welcome to our 3 witnesses this morning. We give them a round of applause right now. Welcome Judy Wicks, who comes from the States, the Bully Network. Canadian Luxembourgian Mexican, the CEO of McCain, and also Rob Hopkins from Great Britain, initiator of the International Transition City Movement. This is how we are going to share with you, ladies and gentlemen. The rule at the World Forum is that you speak in your own language as you wish. And we're going to give you about 10 minutes each for your presentation on a specific topic. And at the same time, as we listen to these presentations, I will suggest a question for reflection. And as I said before, we open this World Forum, and we are followed everywhere in the world. This is streamed all over the world. But there are two places in the world where they are especially attentive because they've gathered together about a dozen players of the territory in Nantes and Strasbourg. I believe we can hear André Subzac. André, can you hear us? Yes, good morning. Good morning, Lille. So you are the academic director of d'Audencia Nantes, one of the business schools in Nantes, and you've gathered, I would say, a number of contributors and players of the territory. Could you describe the team around you? Well, yes, of course. We have representatives from the CSR platform of the Nantes, the Greater Nantes city, gathering representatives of companies, the economic networks, but also trade unions and academics, consultants, players of the social economy and finances. And we have representatives of these platforms who are with me in this room and who are going to work at the same time, because it is important for us to have this group approach of public and private players that move forward to create new business models that are more responsible. Well, thank you very much. There are three sides connected. So Lille, of course, is where most people are. Nantes, where you are, and Strasbourg, we go later, and we have three speakers. So we've determined on each of these three presentations a question, a reflection question, and you, as the two other sides, will, as we go along, we are going to produce ideas to answer a question we are going to ask you. So we're going to put the three questions on the screen so you all understand what we suggest. Nantes will be thinking about the following question. As Philippe Vasseur said, the super local, the rolling out of new business models on the territories involves many stakeholders. Now, the idea is how can we engage the stakeholders? So how do you involve the various stakeholders of the territory? I will not talk about an ecosystem because Philippe Vasseur doesn't like that word. So the community, how do you involve the territory community to transform the models? That's what we suggest to Nantes. Is that okay, André? Perfect for me, yes. That's a theme that we like, and we're going to think about that, reflect upon that, and involve all our contributors here. And I will explain how you will send us your production later on. So, Max Kuhn, this topic in particular, I'm going to ask you to react to the production that Nantes will send us later on when you've shared with us the McCain history. Strasbourg, are you there? Good morning. I'm Emmanuel Faber. I'm director. So, Guillaume, who is with you? Today, we have 20 to 30 representatives of this regional community aiming at the promotion of actions for responsible economies. So here we have institutions like ADEME, the region, BPI or CDCs who are here to support the companies on these CSR issues. We have company representatives like Caisse d'Épargne, the bank, and local, or Burkhardt, a regional company, and also a startup. And we have academics as well, such as the Management School of Strasbourg and the ECAM engineers. And all the we have super local projects with a positive impact, as we said this morning. So Strasbourg is also a community that is gathered around your cluster of CSR cluster. And now we can discover the question we're going to ask you to reflect upon. We're going to ask you to produce ideas to favor, encourage cooperation between the companies on the territory. So we're talking about a networking of companies. And we're probably going to talk about streams and communities of interest. So you're going to tell us how it works. Are you okay with that question? Well, perfect, yes. So thank you for being with us today. And Lille, so you here in this room, the topic we're going to ask you to work on is the concept of equity, fairness. What are the conditions? With whom? How do you organize? How do you steer that? How do you implement that? What are our indicators to ensure that we have an equity on the territory to transform the economy on the territory? So it'll be a subject for you, Rob, this question of territorial equity, fairness between the territories. So let's specify things in a region. You have several subparts, several sectors. How fair is the distribution between the urban and rural areas? In the state, you have several regions. And in Europe, you have several states or Africa, you have several regions. So how can you write this territorial equity? And you will use, ladies and gentlemen, here in Lille, Strasbourg, and Nantes, you will use the Klaxon app. You'll have digital post-it notes that will appear on your app. For those who arrived late, we will give you the codes to log on to Klaxon. But for those who are connected, you will answer on yellow post-it notes how to involve the stakeholders on the territory. Then, next city, I believe Strasbourg, if I'm not mistaken, you will answer on red post-it notes, ideas to favor cooperation between the companies. And Lille, here in this room, you will answer on the green post-it notes. What we ask you is, as speakers make the presentation, is to send one idea per post-it. It's your duty to sell sensible ideas. Nomi and François are there on the stage to sort all that out. And you can, that's how we did it with the Cloud Award, you can also like some post-it that you see. If you like something better, you can always like it. And if we can see a post-it with 5 or 10 likes, it shows there's a true topic there. And I will ask our witnesses to react on this. So we've prepared an image on the screen that will recap the 3 questions, or they recap the colors of your post-its. But if you're in Lille and if you want to react to another question, all you have to do is to take the color. Could we have that slide on the screen, please? That recaps the 3 territories. Here we go. I'd like to remind you that yellow for the Nantes question, red for the Strasbourg question, and green for the Lille question. And finally, and that'd be it for me, you can all along our session send your messages, because we will answer with our 3 speakers after their presentations. The session is now open. Don't wait for the end of a presentation. Do send us your production as you think of these 3 questions that emerge from the 3 testimonies of our guest speakers. It is our pleasure to welcome Judy Wicks. A big thank you, because she will probably tell us, Judy will tell us later on, that there's a lot of things at the same time and significant fights in the States on issues that are very specific in the States, because there are major battles happening at the moment. And Judy, as the other speakers, I've asked you to come with a sentence that could inspire us. Well, thank you for this present that we now have on the screen, and you have an opportunity to comment that just after this. Just to tell you that Judy is, of course, an activist, a super activist of the local within the Bully network, but also in the 80s you created. Because when you invest locally, you create, you innovate. In 1983, you created the iconic white dog that has become a world model on the sustainable practices. 1980s already, we're talking about the sustainable commercial engagement, and then you have an incredible career from demonstrator to demonstrator. You received as such many rewards and awards, international awards, and through your experience, you have started modeling out the way companies locally could reinvent their growth. And this is what's interesting, and this is what we'd like to hear. Welcome, Judy, and I invite you to the microphone.
Thank you so much. Well, they asked me to comment.
Sentence, yes.
Comment on the quote. The quote, well, good morning, everyone. So good to be here in France. The quote is from Wendell Berry, who is a poet, a novelist, a philosopher, and a farmer from Kentucky in the United States. And to me, the quote, it's not on the board anymore, but the quote is, "Without prosperous local economies, the people have no power and the land no voice." To me, this means that when decentralizing our economy into local economies, we're producing local basic needs locally, food, fuel, and fiber. And when we do that, we're moving wealth and power from corporations to our local economies. So that's what that quote means to me. And also because we are establishing a close relationship with the land. To begin, when I ran the White Dog Cafe for 26 years, I had a sign in my closet that said, "Good morning, beautiful business." And it was a reminder to me each morning when I saw that of just how beautiful business can be when we use our creativity and our energy and our care to produce a product or a service that we then offer to our community. So it was a time in the morning for me when I thought of my own business and how the farmers are out in the fields picking organic fruits and vegetables to bring to town. I would think of the animals out in fresh air and pasture, and our goat herder, Dougie, who said that when she kissed the goat's ears, it made the cheese better. And I think that's true. So to me, business is really about relationships. Money is simply a tool. Business is about relationships with everyone that we buy from and sell to and work with, and about our relationship with nature itself. My business was the way that I expressed my love of life, and that's what made it a thing of beauty. Let's see. The green, that's what I'm pushing. Oh, wait a minute, now it went too fast. Well, okay. Which one do I push?
Yes, to return. The next, and you have the picture. Yeah.
This is the forward?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I started the White Dog Cafe in 1983 on the first floor of my house, just as a simple coffee shop, takeout shop, and grew it into a 200-seat restaurant with $5 million in sales. We were best known for, no, I'm still not able to advance this. What's the matter with this thing? Oh, well, but I didn't do that, I don't think.
No? Okay.
It's not working.
No. Okay. You can say next if you want.
It's going to be very hard. All right. So what we were known for most was buying from local farmers. And one of our farmers, Mark Dornstreich, once said to me that good farming was the balance between the masculine and the feminine energies. And he characterized masculine energy as being about efficiency and feminine about nurturing. So if a farmer has too much masculine energy and not enough feminine, he might have a well-run farm, but he's not going to have good tomatoes or chickens. On the other hand, if there's too much feminine energy, you might have beautiful tomatoes, but you're going to go out of business because you're not using your time in an efficient way. Okay, is it now working? Ah, there it goes. Hooray. So probably like the most striking example of this imbalance of masculine and feminine energy is in the industrial food system. The name of the game is how little space do we give these mother pigs? How little light and air? How little food and water so that we can produce the cheapest pork possible? So at the White Dog, we would only buy pork that was raised on pasture, free-range chickens, grass-fed beef, and so on, until one day I looked at my menu and said to myself, oh, here's Dougie. This is the one who kisses her goat's ears to make the cheese better. So I looked at my menu and thought, gee, we've done it now. We have a cruelty-free menu. All of our food, our animal products come from small farms where the animals are treated with respect and dignity. Then I said to myself, I thought, well, this is our competitive advantage. This is our market niche. This is all about us. But then I had a transformational moment, and I said to myself, Judy, if you really cared about these animals, if you really cared about the small farmers being driven out of business, if you really care about the environment that's being polluted with a concentration of manure, if you care about the consumers that are eating this meat that's full of hormones and antibiotics, then rather than keeping this information to yourself, you will share it with your competitors, with the other restaurants. So I realized that there was no such thing as one sustainable business, that we can only be part of a sustainable system. And in order to build that system, we have to cooperate and share with others. So it didn't matter how many good practices were already in my business, using solar energy, paying a living wage, buying from local farmers, that I needed to not just care about the network of farmers supplying my restaurant, but building a whole network of farmers to supply our region, to have a whole food system that had these values. So I asked the farmer, this is Farmer Glenn, we were at the Dance of the Ripe Tomatoes, an event at the White Dog that celebrated our harvest. So I asked Farmer Glenn, who was bringing me 2 pigs a week, would you like to expand your business? And he said, yes. And I said, what's holding you back? And he said he needed $30,000 to buy a refrigerated truck so that he could deliver to the other restaurants in town, and I loaned him that money. And then I started a nonprofit called Fair Food, and the objective of Fair Food was to teach other restaurants, other chefs, how to buy from local farmers. And that's been going on for 18 years. So the business mantra that I disagree with is the mantra of grow or die, that we have to continually grow our businesses bigger and bigger to survive. So when people would ask me, how many restaurants do you have? I would say just one, At first I thought I was a big sissy, but then I realized that it's what I wanted, because if I did a chain of White Dog cafes, I would lose what was most important to me, and that's the relationships, the authentic relationships I had with my staff and my customers and my suppliers. So instead of doing a White Dog cafe in someone else's community, I started a Black Cat in my own community next door, which is a store that featured locally made products and fair trade as well. This got me thinking about how national and international brands, chain stores, and so on are invasive species. They go into other people's communities and smother out the indigenous businesses. So this got me thinking, well, we need to grow. How does nature grow? Well, nature grows deeper in place. Unlike chain stores that routinize and conform and replicate, nature grows deeper in place to become more diverse, more complex, more resilient, and more adaptive to the needs of the ecosystem. And that's just how we need to grow our businesses, to be more adaptive to our communities. What are the needs of our communities? Start that business. My favorite example of this is Zingerman's family of business in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and you're all lucky because the co-founder, Paul Saginaw, is here and will be presenting on Wednesday. But to me, this is the best example of growing in a way that's deeper in place. Instead of doing a chain of Zingerman's delis, which was very popular business, they looked to see what was needed in their community that was not produced locally, and they started a bakery. They started a creamery to produce their own cheese and yogurt and ice cream. They started a coffee roasting business and 5 more businesses. So that they not only did they replace imports into their community with locally made products, but they also increased ownership opportunities by making their employees owners in each of these new businesses. So it's a constant process of sharing power and wealth. To create more owners. The more owners, the more justice we have. We can also reimagine growth. It doesn't have to be material. We don't have to grow in material ways. We can grow by increasing our knowledge, by expanding our consciousness, by deepening our relationships, by developing creativity, by building community, and having more fun. At my business, and by the way, I sold it 10 years ago, so now I'm a full-time activist, but at my business we had educational programs, but we also did a lot of events that were fun to build community and have more fun. And one of them, you might be interested to know, was a Bastille Day party, which we had every July 14th for over 25 years, where we built a Bastille outside, and after dinner, and we changed the name of the restaurant to Café Chien Blanc for the day. And then after dinner, we would dress up some of our customers as French poodles, and we would lock them in the Bastille. And then we dressed up other customers as revolutionaries, and they attacked the Bastille and released the poodles, who all came out doing the can-can with the revolutionaries. So this was always great fun, and it proves the point that we don't have to travel spending carbons and dollars to faraway places to have a good time, that we can actually have more fun in our own community, where we're with our family and friends and neighbors building community. So while learning from my own local economy, I also had many lessons in traveling, and our restaurant had an international sister restaurant project where we took our customers and staff to different countries, and one of them was Chiapas, Mexico. I was very fascinated by the Zapatista uprising on the day that NAFTA went into effect, January 1st, 1994. And in traveling to Chiapas, I found that the reason for the uprising was something that I had never thought about before. It was to maintain their local self-reliance. They wanted to be able to grow their corn and sell it in the domestic marketplace and not compete with US corporate corn growers that were subsidized by our government. They wanted to continue to speak their own language, to teach their children their traditional values, to maintain their own culture, and not become part of the global monoculture that's dominated by Western lifestyle. They did not want to be forced off their farms to work in factories, as the global economy was forcing them to do. They wanted to maintain self-reliance in their basic needs. So I went down there to understand about the Zapatistas, but then I started seeing the similarities between the farmers of Mexico and the farmers in the United States, that they also were being driven out by large corporate farmers, and that people around the world were saying, as the Zapatistas did, no mas, we want to maintain our local self-reliance, yet so many communities were losing this and becoming dependent on long-distance corporate supply chains to bring back basic needs. So this made me think of a new global economy, that we can have a global economy as a network of sustainable local economies, where we produce basic needs locally, our food, our fiber, our energy, and many other things, and that we still trade globally for what we don't have locally in fair trade relationships, in small-to-small relationships, rather than having our global economy monopolized by these huge multinational corporations. And so with this in mind, in 2001, I helped to, I'm the co-founder of BALI, the Business Alliance for Local Living Economies, where we connect local leaders with each other and give them leadership training, where we spread best practices among the various communities, and where we drive investment to our local economies. And at BALI, we have a lens on equity. How can this new locally based economy be inclusive to those who have been left out in the past? So we, basically, it's about local business ownership with regional supply chains, both retail stores and manufacturing. Local supply chains like farm to table, not just fresh produce, but supporting food enterprises that turn the fresh produce into products that we can eat year-round. Dirt to shirt. In the United States, finally, industrial hemp is becoming legalized, so we can grow fiber crops. Hemp is also used in building materials, forest to furniture, for furniture and utensils and houses and so on. sun to socket in the transition to renewable energy, botanicals to body with herbal medicines and shampoos and lotions and so on. The situation is urgent. Climate change makes this urgent. Local economies not only save the carbons of long-distance shipping, but we're really preparing our communities for the hardships that are to come by becoming self-reliant and not depending on these long-distance supply chains that can be disrupted by weather and by social upheaval. So what we need is to change our measure of success away from money to the health and well-being of our communities and our ecosystems, to move from me to we, to make decisions that are for the best of the common good. So we are all members of the vibrant community of life on Earth, that when we understand and feel this, our interconnection with others, we can feel the suffering of the pigs. We can feel the suffering of the small farmers, of dying wildlife that's becoming extinct, and the many people and animals that are currently suffering from climate chaos. The transformation of our economy from one that's life-destroying to one that's life-giving begins with awakening our hearts, the heart of the entrepreneur, the investor, and all of us as consumers. When I made that critical decision to share with my competitors, I was at first afraid. I was afraid that my sales would go down, that my profits would go down, and I didn't make that decision because I figured it out in my head. I made the decision because I felt it in my heart. It was my love for the pigs that caused me to make that decision. My love of animals, of nature, of community was greater than my fear. When we love our places and take responsibility for them, when we open our hearts and lead with love, we can build a just, sustainable, responsible, and joyful economy. And if we do succeed in leaving a viable future and planet for our children and the children of all species, it will be because mankind has finally evolved to take our rightful place in the vibrant community of life, in the web of life, no longer as exploiters, but as lovers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. On lui décerne tout de suite la médaille du super local.
So now we can deploy a joyful economy, but that's what you've been brilliantly showing. A local economy, these new economic models have to be inclusive, otherwise it will not be. And French people are not poodles. So but I don't like to have sort of fuzzy hair. But anyway, the question that we've given to the Strasbourg team, we'll see it coming up now on the screen. Can we sort of show it on the screen, please? What are your ideas in order to foster cooperation between the various stakeholders on the territory? So you've got something like 4,500 businesses that work in a community, in a given community, in particular in Strasbourg. So it'd be interesting to know you in Strasbourg. You already have your CSR organized community. What are your ideas in order to develop, hasten cooperation? Your post-its are red, and Judy will comment what you've done. You've also got, I'm sure, questions to put to Judy after what you've heard, and then we'll deal with this later on. So our next speaker, you've rediscovered or discovered him. That's what I like in the film Demain, Tomorrow. We've seen that film, many of us, I'm sure. And in this film, Rob Hopkins told us about his experience in setting up permaculture, which has been completely adapted and geared towards territory. Rob is always in practical work. He experiments this with his students on the territories, and for about 20 years or so, ever since he created the international transition cities, he's going towards people who demonstrate. He goes to the field and help economic transition, socio-economic transition, ecological transition. You've seen this in Grande-Sainte, in Dunkirk. He's been doing this. He is there to provide assistance throughout the world. We're very happy to have him. You'll have him 3 times today here, and then he'll be in various workshops this afternoon and tomorrow. Welcome, Rob. Thank you.
Can I use this? Yes, good. I like to move around. Good morning, everybody. My quote disappeared. Where did my quote go? I had a great quote, which has disappeared.
Oui, on va l'avoir. Elle va réapparaître.
Oh, well, I'll use that one that's there anyway. I'll use another one. Everything great that's ever happened in this world happened first in somebody's imagination, someone's imagination. So the reason I like to use that quote, does this work? How do I go?
Yes.
This one? No? That one? No? Which one are you pressing? The big green, oh, the really obvious one.
Okay.
So the reason I like to use that quote is because when we look at the challenge that we have, and I think it's really important to put our discussions over the next 3 days in the context of the climate challenge, and at the moment we have this enormous task ahead of us, which, because like most tasks in life, if we leave them and leave them and leave them, they tend to get bigger and bigger and more urgent. So the scale of the cuts that we need to make in our carbon emissions is enormous. And for me, the big challenge that we try to explore in the transition movement is to say, at the moment, in our culture, we have many, many stories about why the place we're in now is brilliant. It's irreplaceable. This is as good as anyone's ever had it. This is fantastic. What we don't have is the stories about the other side of this graph. If we manage to make this historic transition, if by 2050 we manage to cut our emissions to 0, which is really the only way we're going to survive, keep life on this planet, what will that be like? How fantastic could that place be? The food could be so amazing. The beer could be wonderful. The parties, think of the parties we can have when we get there. Think of the reciprocity, the sense of community, the bird song, the clean air. You know, if we can tell those stories, I think it's much, much more likely that we're actually going to get there. Sadly, at the moment, we live with stories like this, which is a car advert I saw on the back of The Economist a few years ago, which would have you believe that humanity has always evolved as men for some very strange reason, and that somehow this car and this suit represent the ultimate. There is nothing after this. We have arrived, everybody. There is no future story beyond this. But for me, what's so important is that we tell the stories about how it turned out okay, how we got through this to a place where human culture was really able to thrive. So what I want to do with in my 10 minutes with you this morning is to tell you some stories. As my friend said, you know, transition is a movement of people who roll their sleeves up, who don't look at this challenge and despair or give up. They say, right, okay, what do we do now here? How can we get started? How could we get started? The people on my street, in my neighborhood, what can we do? So my aim is to give you a rich palette of possibilities, of stories of what people are doing. So sometimes when people start doing transition, they might start planting trees, productive trees in their town, in their city. This was one of the very first things we did in my town, where we started to plant nut trees throughout the town. If you grow hybrid walnuts, you can produce as much protein and carbohydrate per hectare as you can with organically grown wheat. And this was us getting our mayor to balance some walnuts on the end of a spade. So when I first went to see the mayor in my town, She said, she likes to say later, when Rob first came to see me, I thought he was mad. Now, 10 years later, I know he's mad. So some groups start growing food in their neighborhood. This is in London, a transition group growing some food in a garden that they built in the car park of their local hotel. Sometimes people recognize that the place they live in their city, people have very little access to good food. So they start a business that finds good food growing around the city and makes it available. This is in London. The transition group, they started a scheme that takes boxes of vegetables every week to people's houses. Sometimes they might decide to start growing food in more unusual places, but very visible, to make that idea of growing food as part of our life and something we do together, just to make it normal. To normalize, to routinize these things. So this is a transition group growing food on their underground station in London. They might think, actually, the people in our community, we're very dependent on cars. How do we start to break that dependency? Well, let's teach our young people how to ride their bicycles safely, and they create workshops and train young people how to cycle. They might think, actually, what we need to do is to help the people where we live to reduce their electricity use, to reduce their water use. So how do we do that? Do we send them all a DVD in the post? You know, what's the best way to do that? So we created something called Transition Streets, and the idea of Transition Streets is you work with your neighbors, you meet in each other's houses 7 times, you look at water one week, energy the next week, food the next week. What we found when we did this in my town, where 550 households did this, was afterwards when we surveyed them and said, what did you get out of being part of that? Even though they saved themselves nearly 1.5 tons of CO2 a year, on average, nobody mentioned the CO2. All they mentioned was, I know my neighbors better. I feel more connected. I feel more part of this place. It was really, really fascinating. Communities sometimes start to create a vision about that story. What could the future be like? If we could if this was successful, what's the future that we would like to create? And then how might we get there? What we call backcasting. So you say, well, if we're going to get there, we need to have done this, and you work your way back so that you're more able to tell a story about how we went from here to there. Sometimes communities might put on a big street party, a big carnival, and invite everybody to come. This is Transition Town Tooting in London, who created what they called the Trash Catchers Carnival, where everything was made out of recycled materials. They used almost 500,000 plastic bags to make these amazing big animatronic figures and to celebrate the elders in their community. Sometimes you might have people who are really good at helping people insulate their homes, just doing those simple things that we often don't get round to, that mean we have less wind coming in the house, that we lose less heat. So they come together as a group and they go around as volunteers and they insulate people's homes and help them to save money because they enjoy it and because it's fun and it gets them connecting with other people and they get to know their place better. Sometimes a community might discover a lot about itself by doing something like this. This is in Brussels, in Mille-Bruxelles. This is the red light district in Brussels. So here they had, on this street, there was a transition group on this street. They had many of the problems that communities who live alongside prostitution experience, men driving up and down this street all night. So when their municipality put those 2 blocks of concrete to block the street, the people on the street said, we can do better than 2 blocks of concrete. We'd like to make a garden. So they built this garden. And the people came out, they worked together, they'd never even done anything like that before. What they found was that after this garden was built, this was a street, nobody ever stopped on this street. Children never played in this street. That started to change. People could see there were people working in the garden. It's fine for the children to go and play in the street. Tour guides began to bring groups of tourists to come and see this. One of the things I learned from the film Demain was this concept of vegetable tourism. That if you grow vegetables in interesting, curious ways, tourists will come and see it. There is a whole market for vegetable tourism out there, which they discovered here in Brussels. There's something that I love about transition, about that permission to communities to be imaginative and to play, where we unlock ideas that are so wonderful. This is the Brixton pound, £10 note with David Bowie on the note, which is kind of an icon of the transition movement, I guess. I just love the idea that you'd have David Bowie on your money rather than the Queen. And there is talk of a Liverpool pound which would have John Lennon on it, but that hasn't happened yet. So this is a community in Wales who did a project where they realized how much food, perfectly good food, was being thrown away every day in their town. So they created a cafe that took that food and used it to make meals for people on low incomes. So it trained local young people, gave them a way in to becoming part of the catering industry. It solved the problem of food waste. They saved 20 tons of food every year from being thrown away. And they meant people had a place to come where they could afford to eat and they could afford to meet other people. Again, what we look at in transition is that idea of bringing people together, creating as many opportunities for people to interact with each other. For me, one of the worst things that happen, one of the worst damnations of our current economic model is that it creates an epidemic of loneliness, what sociologists call an epidemic of loneliness. If your economic model creates an epidemic of loneliness as some kind of accidental byproduct, then you really need to look more closely at that system. So what we try and do is to create as many opportunities for people to meet. This is in Scotland, where the transition group created a project that looked to try and reduce the amount of car use in the place. Because they were from this place, rather than experts coming in from London with clipboards, they were able to work with people, understand that community. In the end, they reduced the amount of car travel in this community by a distance equivalent to going to the moon and back 2.5 times. And promoted cycling, promoted walking, because they were from that place and they knew that place. This is in London, where in a neighborhood where they have no green, they have no town square, there is no public space that isn't full of cars. This place normally is full of buses. It's a turning circle where the buses wait to be called. So they created a day where they said, we're going to turn this into a village green. This is now your green. And they lived as though that had already happened. I love that idea that we create as many possibilities for people to live and experience the world as we need it to be in our current daily reality. A lot of transition groups try to support young people who have new ideas. This is called a local entrepreneur forum, where a community comes together to support businesses, kind of community-supported enterprise. This is in Ungersheim in France, where they created a conservatoire next to a commercial market garden to create more jobs by using the produce to turn it into new products. This is a transition group in the north of England who their local council had a farm that they didn't want anymore, they couldn't afford anymore. So the community took the farm into community ownership and they run it as a care farm, providing the care for people in the community who most need it. Transition is also not an idea that only occurs at the community level. We see in many universities now have transition organizations. This is Transition Edinburgh University, who do amazing things in the context of university. This is the Totnes pound, the local currency in my town. We have a £21 note just because you can. And again, I love that idea of, well, let's just play around with that. This is in Lancaster, where they have a project called Fruit Roots, where they go into, they work with communities to plant edible corridors, and people can just help themselves to the produce. In this town, their shop was closing, so local people raised enough money to open the shop as a cooperative owned by the community, sourcing local produce. Again, when you look at the world through transition glasses, there are so many opportunities. This is in Pasadena in Los Angeles, where the transition group run a repair cafe. They say you can bring anything to us. It can be your iPad, your curtains, your trousers. We will repair it free of charge. There's one condition, which is that while we repair it, you sit in a chair opposite us and you tell us a story about your life. So I would ask you, what are they really repairing in that repair cafe? This is a town that has gas lamps, which are historic and are one of the features of the town. The transition group came together and upgraded it and made it much more efficient, and so that it can run on locally generated methane gas. The Bristol pound is a local currency scheme in the city now, millions of them in circulation that you spend using your phone, which has had a real impact in terms of the local economy. In my town, we do an event every year called Eco Homes, where you can go around to 30 different really interesting homes where ordinary people have made their house more energy efficient. You go and visit, you ask them questions. Transition is increasingly something which is becoming the new economic story of those places. This is in my town, Transition Homes. We'll build 27 homes to meet local need, using local materials in community ownership. You know, what are the needs of the place we live and how can we meet them? Once some transition groups open a shop, an empty shop, and say this is a place with nothing for sale but lots on offer, as a place that gathers people's stories. What do you love about this place? What do you fear about the future? What do you hope for? There's the idea of getting people to invest into their local economies rather than into the banks is a really big one in transition. How do we put our money into creating the kind of economy we want to see? This is in the city of Bath. They have their own energy company, which has raised £13 million from local people. We can create an economic strategy that shows that this move towards more local, as we did in my town, can actually be the future economic story of the place where we live. People learn how to keep bees. I love this photograph. They look like they've landed from outer space. This is a transition group teaching beekeeping in London. This is in Luxembourg, where the community have created a community-supported farm, which has been really successful. In my town, we've created another project called Atmos, which is the regeneration of an old factory. In a town of 8,000 people, more than 5,000 people have been involved in the consultation. This will be 67 homes, a hotel, workspaces, all in community ownership, which will have such an enormous impact in terms of what the community can do going forward. In London, this transition group created their own market, which has won many, many awards and created lots of opportunities for people to step in and become entrepreneurs. In Ungersheim, there's a film called Qu'est-ce qu'on attend? Has anyone seen that film about what's happening in Ungersheim? A really wonderful film about the transition story of what's unfolding there. And lastly, I want to just finish by telling you about Lille. So Lille in Belgium, they started a project 4 years ago called a Ceinture Alimentaire, which I don't need to translate for you, which is a project that says, what if, in a generation's time, the majority of food eaten in Liège comes from the land immediately around Liège? It's a beautiful what-if question. I went back 4 years later, a few months ago. They've started 15 new cooperatives. They've raised €5 million from local people. I talked to the mayor of the city who said, 8 years ago we wanted to be a smart city. Now we want to be a transition city. This is our story. So for me, fundamentally, what we try and do in transition is to change the story that we tell about the future, to bring the kind of future that we dream of, that we aspire to life. This is the shop they run called the Petit Producteur. And when I asked him, how far can this go? The guy who runs the shop said, well, by the time we open 10 of these shops, the supermarkets will start to fragilize, which is a beautiful word in French that doesn't quite work in English, but it also really does, fragiliser. That's a bit of a rush through many, many different things. I could do this for hours. Transition is active in 50 countries around the world, where you'll hear stories like this coming up all the time. And for me, what we really need to be doing now more than ever is to bring the imagination into the conversations that we have. And thank you for your attention this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. C'était dans la playlist de Rob. Laissez-les.
It was in Rob's playlist. It's great music. Yeah, let's listen to Bowie. Yeah. The interpreters like it too. I'm sure that this is part of our next guest's playlist. Just before we do that, a major quiz. Spend a night with Rob Hoskins. No, I'm joking. Just 10 minutes with him. So you go into the with the hashtag WFRE18 on Twitter, and then you can follow what Forum Echo, and we'll have a draw for a one-to-one with Rob at the end of today to continue sharing and deepening ideas. Oh, you're so lucky. And deepening on this very, very important topic. No, honestly, I mean, this is a true competition. You two can win, and we'll see how many entries we have in this competition. Now, he's made the great demonstration on, well, actually more than involvement of citizens. Actually, people build these new models. So somehow, in all these demonstrators shown quickly, one after another, we give the keys to the residents, the players, the people in the neighborhoods, and we support them to create these new models. It is incredible what we've seen in everything that's all over the world. And you saw very quickly that Rob has actually written a number of books, and we'll give you the references during the workshop. Do you like Bowie? Yes? I knew it. I knew it. Oh, yes. Mustn't forget the reflection, my papers here we go, around Rob's presentation. This is for you here in Lille, so you contribute on your green post-it notes on the equity, the fairness of transition, and under what conditions of a transition of these models, and the economical and ecological transition. So go ahead, continue producing, and we'll summarize that. Are you getting contributions, Nomid, François? Yes, they say a lot, a lot. Oh, good, good, perfect. Our third guest speaker born in Luxembourg and Canadian, residing in Canada for many years now, great experience in the agro-food industry. And before joining McCain, several types of experience, especially one that was inspiring was Danone. Funny enough, Danone, that's what Philippe Vasseur mentioned earlier on, with Emmanuel Faber. And now you joined McCain in 2012, had several positions. You are now CEO of this major food group, Canadian food group, that has 20,000 employees all over the world. And in this region, we know what it's like, the king of chips or French fries. So the inspiring quote, please comment it in a few moments, and then we'll listen to you. Welcome, Max. Thank you, Jean-Michel, and good morning, everyone. My inspiring quote will come later in my presentation because I'd like to start with faces, inspiring faces for us. If I manage to have work this, I think this is the major challenge of the world for us, isn't it? Here we go, here we go. 4 faces, 4 names from left to center. One here, Bertrand Act is sitting with us, Frédéric Patin, Elias Moeli, and Luce Mican. These are names that don't mean much, except Bertrand, of course. But for us, they represent a lot, because these are our partner farmers. They are our first connection with the soil and territories. And I wanted to start with them because what is a territory? It's the history or story of men and women, the soil and the environment. And with the creation of McCain more than 60 years ago, it is this local anchoring in the rural environment for us on 5 continents that made our strength. And today, as we all are, we have to face major changes of unprecedented size. I'm talking about the climate warming. I'm talking about the obligations of sustainable development. And this deep anchoring will help us find solutions. And this is what I'd like to talk with you and share with you this morning. I wanted to start by showing you how old this anchoring is. That in 1867, Franceville is a small village where McCain was born in a rural province of New Brunswick. And the McCain brothers are sons of potato farmers. Harrison and Wallace are salespeople in the only big company in the area, but they want to be entrepreneurs. So they have to find a founding idea for their company. And they realize that at the other end of the continent, northwest of the States, there's a flourishing industry, which is the transformation of potatoes into frozen products and chips or French fries. So rather than up there to start new activity, they start to import the new technology in their village. Nobody knows about that. Set up the first plant and take a risk. And since they are entrepreneurs, incredible entrepreneurs, they succeeded and developed very quickly. And from there, they conquered the world. As you can see them at the official opening of their plant, and very quickly, they set up in the UK, in the States, in France, and over the world, as shown in this, up to Tasmania. So imagine these two brothers living in Franceville, New Brunswick, in the potato fields, and open a plant in Tasmania. They open one in South Africa, Colombia, etc., etc. But in all this conquest, this adventure, they have common founding principles. Here are two, and that was the sentence that we drink the local wine, means that we adapt to the local environment. And the second one, this is very important as well, is good ethics is good business. So good business based on actual good ethical principles. And these principles are still the founding principles in every decision we make at McCain. So this local anchoring is key. And this is why we perceive ourselves more as a multi-local company than a multinational company. Now, you're going to tell me, what's the difference? Well, the difference, I'd like to explain it by coming back to the fact that our relationship with our environment goes through 3,400 farmers on 5 continents. So this means that everywhere we set up, when we set up a potato plant, it's right in the middle of potato fields. We set up our plant, but if we develop relationship by developing teams of agronomists, developing with farmers to develop a stream to work on the long term on the growth, yield, quality, and sustainability by working on the use of water and the stability of soil. And I will give you a number of examples. I will start with the region we're in today. Our first plant in France, we opened it in Arnes in 1980, close to here in the mining fields, and the potato cultivating, the potato farming was declining and of low quality. We helped farmers to gather together to then, as the years went on, to create the GAPI, the groupment of potato farmers for the industry. Bertrand is the chairman of the GAPI, and also Jean Bernot, just behind him, who has been the major architect for this initiative. What this has allowed us to do is to invent a new model in the farming world, especially in the potato growing world, is to have multi-yearly contracts, which seems simple, but it's not a practice in our industry. So that allows farmers to have visibility over the income, to invest on the long term, and allowing us to give ourselves tools to work on sustainability, because everyone has got a visibility. So it's producing locally, but very importantly is also being responsible locally. And in 2018, to be responsible locally is to face unprecedented challenges. And what is critical for us is global warming. And the second thing is the sustainability of the rural world. And I will start with global warming. We all know that the signs of this local catastrophes are very different from one region to the next. I mean, we can see the south of France is underwater, and in the north of France, it's like summer. But this summer was catastrophic for us as well. Last summer was for agriculture. As you can see, the pictures of the potato fields, what is supposed to look like on the left in a normal summer, and what we had in many fields, not all fields, but many fields, shown here on the right. That's the simple result of extreme heat and an extreme drought. And we have to be prepared. That is going to happen again, more and more often, unfortunately. So we will have to make major adjustments to continue surviving so that farmers can survive in an environment like this one. Now, what does this mean is that we'll have to invest. Farmers will have to invest with us in new irrigation techniques, or micro-irrigation. It will mean investing in storage, and it will not happen like that. So we are currently working with farmers who implemented 10 pilot farms to manage water more efficiently. But it is such a wide-ranging topic that will not get to major transformation without the governments or the regional governments and also the banking sector to finance this investment. So we are talking here about mobilizing on a very many people for this. We bet on technology that will provide solutions. So we are investing in 2 startups in Canada for the moment to test out the concept for the box. We invest in a company that does hydroponic agriculture, so vertical farms, where we have totally technology-controlled environments to grow vegetables. So it's one way to provide local production in significant quantities and extremely good quality. In Canada, salads, for example, come from California. The east of Canada, salads go 5,000 kilometers to come to the stores. Now, we have a local solution at a big enough scale to deliver the major population catchment areas with less water consumed and no pesticides. So this is to provide ideas. All the learning we're going to have in these control environments is also going to give us ideas and solutions for classic agriculture. It's only the start, but it's something we are looking at very closely. The second thing is high-definition imagery. We've invested in a company that collects data through drones, agricultural onboard cameras that transform these images into data, and then feeding algorithms that will help us develop more precise tools for farmers to continue working on yield while improving the impact on the environment of our agricultural practices. These are but 2 examples. Now, if we change the context, in very different contexts, we have to find different solutions. We are present in India. In India, our operation is in Gujarat, which is a western state, which is semi-arid, so water is very precious. We've been working with 800 farmers who have very small farms, and this is one of the farmers. And one of the ancestral practices has been to just immerse flood fields. So imagine in an area where water is precious, the consequences of that. So we've implemented micro-irrigation programs that allow us to maintain the yield while reducing the consumption of water by more than 60%. So this is another concrete example, rather ambitious one, requiring to review practices that are ancestral practices to find solutions against global warming for sustainable agricultural practices. But let's agree here. I'm not here to tell you that we have an answer to everything and we have all the solutions. There's still a lot of work on our plate. To move on to the second topic of desertification of the farms and the rural landscape, I was telling you that the territory is men and women. One of the challenges we have in all over the world is that the rural world is getting empty. When we look at the figures in France, we can see that 25% of farmers live under the level of poverty. There are only 450,000 farms in France with very few young people. Because there's an economic issue, of course, but there's also a topic of perception of declassification, social declassification for many farmers. So we have a true topic of renewal for farming. So what kind of solution can we have? Well, we've worked, the McCain teams have worked in a number of countries, and we don't have an answer to everything everywhere. But I wanted to share with you two specific examples in two different places. First one is South Africa. In South Africa, we've been working with the black emerging farmers, as they are called there, and Ilya is one of them. And after the apartheid, there was a beginning of redistribution of the land to the black farmers. Now, it was not accompanied by a transfer of knowledge. So the McCain teams locally have developed one training program over 5 years for these farmers. And they train both on agronomic and agricultural skills, but also on the management of farms, so operational management, if you wish. Thanks to that, we managed to make these farms sustainable, and rather than have people buying land and not doing what to do with it, it creates local jobs. And for us, it is a source of pride because we can see these farms getting sustainable and providing food to the local territories. Another example, we've invested in Colombia with Professor Yunus organization in an initiative called Campo Vivo. And they work with farmers in the south of Bogota. And they had a simple issue, is that there are people who have fled from the FARCs, so they have come closer to the city in a low production countryside. So they fled territory at war, but without any means of surviving. And what Campo Vivo has done as a co-company between Professor Yunus and McCain is to give access to seeds, is give access to know-how, and above all, guarantee the purchase of potatoes at a responsible price. This is why 450 hectares of viable culture has been created and getting out of poverty many families. So this is the end of my tour of these various territories to give you concrete examples of how we can provide locally, working with local communities, how we can find sustainable solutions. And my objective as CEO of McCain is the same as our shareholders, is that we develop a sustainable, healthy company. And for this, within 10, 20, or 40 years, we must have potato farmers and a healthy soil. And this is why the sustainable rural development is at the very core of our strategy more than ever. And this strategy is entirely local. We'll have formulas that we can replicate from one place to another, but the success will be local. And we have faced to us some complex challenges. Desertification of countryside and climate change. But I'm convinced, and we are convinced at McCain, that there is room for innovation, a transition to a more organic or ecological farming. But farmers will not manage alone. It will be a long-term strategy, and we've decided, McCain, to be a stakeholder. Thank you for your attention. So we're talking about the time scale with this involvement, this commitment in the long term. You've told us, and that was interesting to look into this, you're talking about signing contracts with the local stakeholders. I have heard as well that this dynamics with the players at the local level encourage innovation. There are two examples really of as you cannot do that in the R&D department because it started from requirements and local answers to this. And see how a global group like you is concerned with equity and the fairness of territories. Well, thank you very much. And the question, the reflection question with Max Kuhn's presentation is for our friends in Nantes. It's going to be now shown on the screen, and it concerns, if we can display it, please, the involvement of the stakeholders on the territory. Now, debriefing, ladies and gentlemen. And if you are watching this in Nantes and Strasbourg, I'm give you 2 or 3 minutes, so we can have a kind of a mess here, 2 to 3 minutes to actually complete your production on these 3 questions. So Nantes, you have Nantes question, it's yellow post-it notes. From Strasbourg on red post-it notes, and the Lille question on green post-it notes. So I'll give you 3 minutes to complete that, and we'll have some music, and then we can have a rest here on the stage, and within 3 minutes we'll stop production, and then we'll go to an exchange with our 3 speakers based on the question you've sent us. I think we have quite a lot of them on the message. For quarter of an hour, and at 12:15, we will debrief on your 3 questions with our 3 major keynote speakers. So 3 minutes to complete your production. Maybe it's your duty to share with your neighbors, and then we'll go see what it's like with Noémie and François. And you do the same thing, and Nantes, Strasbourg, same thing, okay? So we'll be with you in a moment.
On vous laisse encore 1 minute parce que là on a eu plein de choses. 1 minute et on ferme la session des post-it.
So 1 more minute.
Encore 30 secondes pour les post-it et on ferme la session. « 30 secondes et on échange avec nos témoins. Ok. C'est bon pour les post-it. Alors, mesdames, messieurs, nous allons fermer la session des post-it parce qu'on en a vraiment des dizaines et des dizaines. On va les analyser dans quelques instants. On va ouvrir maintenant la session des messages pour vos questions à nos 3 intervenants. Alors, je vous donne 30 secondes pour vous nous envoyer vos questions à nos 3 intervenants. Et ensuite, on démarre l'échange. D'accord ? Vos questions sur le fil message, vite, vous nous les envoyez. Et puis toutes les questions sont acceptables, bien évidemment. Hein. Voilà, vos questions sur le fil message.
Yeah, your questions are there. They're appearing now.
D'accord. Oui, très bien. Comment ? On va commencer à...
So we're going to start to show the questions on the screen there.
Super. Alors j'ai pas mal de questions pour McCain.
Lots of questions to McCain, Rob and Judy, don't forget them as well.
Ok, d'accord. Très bien.
So a few more seconds and go ahead. So you'll be able to ask your questions while we talk anyway, once the debate has started, no problem.
On me demande de remettre le code.
So display the code for, please, so that if there are people who've just arrived and haven't been able to connect, display it on the screen again, please.
For Robert Hopkins, did you have any experience from a cooperative to generate renewable energy? D'accord. Ah oui, il en a, il a des exemples là-dessus. Ok. Bon, Caris, ça va bien, là, hein, vos photos. Je sais pas qui vous êtes, mais on vous a repéré. On va vous exfiltrer bientôt. Ouais. Ouais. Ok, bien. Allez. Alors, votre attention.
So we'll start again. What I suggest is we should tackle a few questions. They keep coming in, of course, but Nantes, Strasbourg, and elsewhere in the world. There was one question. Can we highlight it again for Max? On basically shares. What sort of shareholders structure do you have that helps you actually function, which allows you to have sustainable strategy? It's McCain, which has a 100% holding in the company. I'm not saying that the fact that we're thinking long-term is only because we're a family structure, but it gives us wide options because the family ultimately decides what the business should be like. Can we have a question for Rob or Judy? There was an interesting one on solar farms. Rob, do you have experiences of the development of local solar farms run cooperatively? Is that the question? Yes.
There are many transition groups who have created community energy companies and who invite local investment. The thing that was really disappointing was up until about 4 years ago in the UK with the feed-in tariff for solar energy functioned in such a way that there was a really good opportunity for communities to invite a community to invest in solar and then for the benefits of that to go to the people and also to fund other local projects. Even to the extent that the British government created what was called a community energy strategy, which was a policy about how to support this explosion of people forming community energy companies, and many of them were transition groups. Sadly, they then changed the policy and decided that actually our future lay in the promotion of fracking rather than solar energy, and they cut the tariff very, very quickly, and so many of those projects stopped being able to function. But then what we saw there for a few years was a really beautiful model where communities could install renewable energy, the money it generated would benefit the community, it was a place for people to invest their money rather than the bank into the community, and I have no doubt that if there was a more enlightened government in place that model could come back. And I see there are many energy cooperatives as well forming in Belgium, France, different places doing the same model.
Vous avez... Alors, on essaie de donner...
Do you have a question for Judy? The question is, tell us. That's a question for the Poly network. How does the governance system work? How does it work to ensure the sustainability of the network work and the dynamics of the business sort of system? How does it work?
How does the structure of Bali work?
Yes.
Comment fonctionne?
Okay. Well, it's not a...
Le pilotage.
How do you monitor it? How do you sort of guide it somehow? Is that you have a way of orienting it, or?
Bottoms-up organization. It's not top-down. So Bali central headquarters does not impose ideas, or structure on the local networks. The local networks bubble up in their own regions with their own values and models and so on. And Bali really acts as a connector to share the ideas, the best practices in one community to share it with another. And to connect the leaders in the local economies so that they can collaborate and cooperate. So there's not really a structure that's imposed. It's the whole idea really is that that ideas come from local experience, and each locality is different in terms of their weather and their conditions and so on. It's really, bubbling up from the local level.
OK. Une question pour Rob.
Question for Rob? It's a question of what drives it, how do you get people to be interested, to be actually the actors, to be fully involved in the changes. Can you say a bit more about that?
The first thing I would want to say is I don't want to give the impression that transition is really, really easy. That a lot of the projects that I've shown you are the result of people with a lot of determination, a lot of hard work, often as volunteers, but driven because they love the idea, they love the project, they love the story. I think in my experience, there is something about the transition model that that starts without knowing all the answers and is very happy to be that way. So we use a lot of things like Open Space, World Cafe, these tools to invite people in. And so for me, it's often about finding a really good question. So in Lille, that question about what would it look like if in a generation's time the majority of food eaten here came from around here is such a beautiful question because it creates so much space for other people to step in and go, I could bring that, I could bring that, I could do that. I think one of the challenges always in something like transition is because you are working at a community scale. So some people will say, that's a big project, I will give 10 years of my life to making sure that happens. Some people will say, I have a weekend a month, I have an hour a week, I have a day a week I can give. Different people have different amounts they can give, and the projects need to be able to accommodate that. But my experience is that when you start transition, if you have a good invitation, if you create events which feel like a celebration, if you create spaces for people to digest what they learn with each other, that people come. People at this point in history really want to feel like they can do something that makes some kind of a difference. When people feel lonely and disempowered, something like transition is such a beautiful invitation for them to step into action, step into feeling like they're part of seeing the world around them change.
Question pour Max. Alors, il y a une question qui va s'afficher, mais juste avant.
So just another question. We've got, I think, 50 questions on organic foods. Somebody said, okay, fine. Transition towards an organic movement? How do you organize it locally? And maybe it'll be great when we stop buying chips in plastic bags or something. Yes, we're working on that. We've got an organic offering, which we have, particularly in Belgium. You have to know that the sourcing in the organic sector is not sufficiently developed to be able to switch completely to organic chips. It's also a long-term element. We have to be able to have a proper line of sourcing. If there's, for example, a problem with diseases and we do no longer have the products in the shop, then we have a problem. So we really have to have a sustainable source, basically, or sourcing, and it's got to be economically viable. There's also a number of questions. I think the idea of potato fields, there was a very bad potato harvest this year. How do you take this into account? How do you cope with climate change, climate warming, the impact on the soil, the lowering of nutriments in the soil, in the ground? How do you tackle this with the farmers? There are various approaches. We're still learning as we go along. The first one is that, along with our farmers, we're trying to do rotation that are as lengthy as possible between harvests. We know that the longer the rotation, the better, the more fertile the ground becomes, the soil becomes, which allows you to have less possibility of diseases, and will have fewer elements to give to the soil. But on the other hand, we're also trying to develop biodiversity, basically by practicing rotation. Every 4, 5, or 6 years we rotate, and we bring biodiversity in this rotation pattern. Then we can improve what we do and have sustainable crops and lower the use of elements to remedy the situation. So we do that via contracts. Or what you do, we together with the farmers, we define the way we'd like to have the harvest, and year on, year out, we actually try and adapt, and we include it into our best farming practices. Another question for Judy and Rob. I like this question because I've got about a dozen or so on that. We're sharing experiences. We have demonstrators. We have innovation. Fine. So the urgent question, how can you intensify this? How can you streamline such local models? What can we do in order to upgrade, to make sure that there's mass taking of this sort of attitude? Judy, what?
Things that Bali does is to take a good idea from one place and communicate it nationally so that it can be used in other places. For me, everything is really in my own community. So I'm trying to focus on how can my region in Philadelphia move faster. And I think a very important part of all this is really about the consumers, to educate consumers about the importance of buying from local entrepreneurs, and also to invest locally, that we need to move money from the stock market to our local economies, to finance the local entrepreneurs that are building our local economies. So I think that's, to me, using the consumer dollars to purchase local products, but also to invest in local entrepreneurs are the way to grow this.
Okay. Rob?
My friend David Fleming, who was a real hero of mine, he used to say that we need to stop looking for silver bullets, and we need to think instead of silver buckshot. Like we need to think of lots and lots and lots of different solutions rather than just trying to find the one solution. And the question about how do we scale this up is the question that I sit with every day. I think everybody involved in this kind of work really thinks about every day. So a few things are, one of the things Transition Network is doing is a project called Municipalities in Transition, which is working around the world to capture the best practice of what it looks like when bottom-up community work meets the municipality coming the other way in a way that they both work together towards this kind of an aim. And that's a network that is collecting best practice and running events. I think we need to be much better at telling stories about the things that are happening around the world. A lot of my work is really collecting these stories and sharing these stories, not so that you will go away and replicate them exactly, but that you can take a seed of that kind of that back and create it in your own way. I think we need at the local scale to look to be, where possible, to become the governments of the place where we live. How do we have people who are involved in transition who then run for local government and start to change things at that level? And there are good examples of that. I think we need to be finding ways all the time to bring young people and diversity into the movements of what we're creating. And for me, it's really about the models. You know, we need to live this. This transition is not an academic exercise that exists in a book-lined office in a university. It's a real-life experiment with dirt under its fingernails, and some things work and some things don't work. But for me, the most important thing we need to be doing at the moment is trying these things out, testing, learning from the best practice of what we can see around us, and trying models that will work at the local scale.
Step by step. Et les petits pas, bien sûr.
And elect good people who aren't made.
I just wanted to emphasize how important it is having local government, be aligned with this work. That's one of the projects I'm working on now, is to try and put into office our local politicians who understand the importance of local economies. These are politicians who have pledged not to take money from fossil fuel companies, for instance, because in the United States, so much is ruled by fossil fuel industry. They've corrupted all of our politicians, especially in my state of Pennsylvania, where fracking is a very big issue. So that's one of the things that I'm working on right now at home, is to elect politicians who have pledged not to take money from them, who have pledged to move our state towards 100% renewable, and to build local economies. So I think that's a really important point.
Max, vous avez un avis sur cette question?
Max, do you have an opinion on this? For us, it's the same topic. The idea is to have good local solutions and transfer them more widely. And we can see there are lots of working models. So what we're going to do in the next years, is to take, because we're going to set up our investments, we're trying to replicate on the basis, we're going to take all the various factories that are configured in a certain way, and we're going to put them through the best practice model. We'll adapt them to the local economy on the basis of the configuration that they have. So there's one thing we have to do, is to try to analyze our production. Thank you very much. François, we're going to do it, I promise. All these questions, we'll put them on posters and we'll put them in the walking areas in the World Forum venue, so you'll be able to look at them. There's still a chair. Thank you to the Strasbourg and Nantes people. That's your production here. Well, as I said, turn them into posters. It's very valuable for us. Noémie has zoomed on some specific points. Each of you has a topic. That's for Max on yellow. So the question is, how can you involve the local stakeholders? So Philippe, maybe you could give us a global view on those questions. What can we see? We've singled out a few post-its. We have to agree on a common language that is understandable by everybody. We all use the word CSR. Everybody agrees that it sort of conjures up 5 dimensions, create a discourse, a future history. I'm sorry, but it's going too fast. I can't read the sentences. Never mind. So we have to reduce our carbon footprint, try to foster collective intelligence, mobilize people's interest on basically local activities for each stakeholders. And then I'll ask Philippe and our Nantes people to say a few things by phone. Lots of topics actually put forward. I'd like to single one out, the idea of being multi-actor or shareholder, or as a business, you can't say you're going to solve the problem that affects us. We have to work with our farmers, with public authorities, other businesses. So what we see, and what we see more and more, we're not just working with our line of sourcing, but we also work with other businesses, with Danone, Unilever, just to quote a few examples. And we have a common view. A coalition of people want to move things forward, and we can then move things along much faster. But we take them on a small scale. We take the problems on a small scale, otherwise we'll boil the ocean. So as in McCain Corporate, have you actually written your story, basically, about what you expect from tomorrow's world? You personally, maybe. How can you qualify this? A world group that is deeply rooted locally. You've shown this eminently with these examples. So considering what you come across in your basically on the ground, how do you contribute to tomorrow's world? To which extent? We want to be a responsible business. We want to be relevant in 10 or 15 years. It means for our employees, for our consumers, all the people who work for us, our staff. We don't work as we used to 20 years ago. Our factories have to change in terms of energy consumption, impact on the environment. So what we're starting to see now is a major transition towards totally new ways of working. So we have many questions. We don't have the answers, but by working with universities, local authorities, we try to define specifically, practically what it boils down to. But the answers are still budding, basically. If the Nantais are still there, would you like to add something, maybe? Yes, we're still there, André is replying. We started off from a very specific example. We called it nego training. We tried to help people negotiate their remuneration. So we wanted to show that we had to start off from a very concrete basis. There's a big difference between what men and women get in terms of salaries in our region. So then we said we wanted to focus on solutions. We told them that with this training, to better negotiate your salary, it would be a specific way of fighting against this difference in salaries between men and women. We thought that would be important for all the people all the stakeholders. Some were a bit resistant at the beginning, particularly in the business circles. We said we had to try and attract women and motivate them by paying them properly. So we had groups of women, academics, and to try and sort of put things on the table, debate things openly. And we shared all this. And there were group leaders that were there, and they could actually register completely freely to those groups.
Par rapport à cette expérience.
Very interesting for this experience in not the World Group. How do you make up in terms of HR with the social reality of the various territories? I mean, you was talking about equal opportunities for men and women and the salary equality. Well, the way we work, we define a number of global principles with local regional application. The idea is not to explain to everyone how to work, but rather to make available tools and then ensure that the initiatives are local, because this is where they are relevant. If we try to have a copy and paste, will be totally off the mark, as many companies do. I'd like to make a comment on this field. Well, what is remarkable in what Max has told us is that any company today is faced with a number of evolutions. Those who have understood that are going to suffer. Of course, it's due to the what we can know in terms of climate change, evolution, new technologies. But if I understood you right, it's the very essence of the company that is reflecting today. What will the company become? How it will behave in the future? There is something that is remarkable. What I've remarked in that is that you've used the word multi many times. You talked about multi-players that you have to include in your reflection. And there's one thing that struck me. You said we're not a multinational, we're a multi-local company. And it defines the role that a major company set up all over the world, 20,000 employees, including Tasmania. I mean, amazing, unbelievable. And you have this approach. And this approach is both global in your idea of work, but each time adapted locally. So this is really a very good definition, because how can a multinational company be interested in territories? And this is the answer. Thank you very much. We'll have a look at the production of the Lille Group. It was green post-it notes, same thing. You had a great production. We're going to zoom in on a production we're going to look at quickly together. And this is for Rob. You'll have to comment it. So, developing platforms for schools, companies, the civil society, not forgetting anybody around the table to find sustainable solutions, under the condition that you respect the aspirations, the expectations of each territory. Have a common territory strategy and collective evolution. Submitting projects and requests for bids to territory. Generative movement. Giving a voice to the young people. Yes, that's a good topic. Yes, the young ones. When should we go and get the youth? Okay, economic balance, guaranteeing fair prices to producers, the autonomy, energy autonomy of each territory. A global comment on this production, Rob? And talk about the young, the youth.
Yeah. The thing that I love about transition and about the conversations that we see is you have a beautiful word in French which we don't really have in English, collage. There isn't really a version of that. You know, I love that for me, we can look at climate change. We beard, anyway, that we can feel completely overwhelmed and like we can't do anything, or actually we can look at it through a different perspective and see that there's the most enormous opportunities of trying to work with a limited number of possibilities, that actually that's where the imagination comes in. I'm at the moment researching and writing a book about imagination and whether at a time in history that requires us to be at our most imaginative, we are actually facing a kind of a crisis of the imagination, a contraction of our collective imagination. And for me, one of the things where we see that most is when we're talking about young people is in school. You know, this should be a time when young people are coming out of school full of possibilities, full of ideas, full of with a really strong imagination. But we see again and again that an education which is very much based on testing everything, on the idea of here is a problem, there is one correct solution to this problem, and if you don't come up with that, then it's the wrong answer, is completely the wrong thing. We need to be we need school to be something which is about taking risks. I think we need school to be an immersion in the kind of future that I've talked about. So our schools should be market gardens, they should be energy generating, they should be connected with the community. Young people should learn skills with their hands and should leave completely full of imagination rather than, we see in the UK a massive mental health crisis with young people, record levels of anxiety and depression is completely the wrong thing that we need to be doing right now. You know, we need education to be something that you leave completely ready to be a passionate, to be passionately involved in the challenges that we face now. And schools, I think, is where we need to start. We need to completely reimagine the role of education in our society today, because it isn't creating the kind of inner resources that young people need, I think.
Alors, cet après-midi, vous allez signer quelque chose là, avec la communauté.
This afternoon you're going to sign something with the community, aren't you? But he's right, isn't he? I mean, you have things to prevent. Of course he's right. Otherwise you wouldn't be here sitting on this stage, obviously. This afternoon we'll have in this very auditorium what we call the masterclass. So we're going to deliver Jeremy Rifkin to a population of young people from 18 to 25 and older. So we're going to tell the youth, you have here someone who thinks about the future, looks ahead, and please interact with him. I'd like to add two things. First, we've created here in this region, we've launched, the regional council has, in 5 high schools, what we call pilot ones, some Rev3 factories, as we call them. So we ask young people to invent their own future as part of Rev3. And we would like, and we'll do that next year, we would like to implement a school, a Rev3 school, not a physical school, but a kind of a network to train the young ones to this evolution. And finally, and I will conclude on this because I know where you want to take me. This afternoon, here, we're going to sign an agreement for cooperation between all universities in this region, the major business schools and the research centers. Now, it may seem trivial to you, but honestly, having to have in one room the whole teaching, higher education world and research, it was not obvious, but we've offered them a project and a vision. And last thing, there was a question that was asked to the Lille, and we're talking about equity, territorial equity. To come back to the question that you asked me earlier on, territorial equity is not considering that there are territories that are left to the side and decline, while others are going to prosper. This is what we are having today. That's what we call the territorial fracture. And I think it's a major break, and it's serious between the rural area and the cities. And it's also serious for major cities and smaller ones. So there's one word, there's a key word, is solidarity, that should be expressed in solidarity of territories, one for the others, including through the redistribution of budgets. A territory cannot develop alone with poor territories around it, and this is So this is not being egotistical, it's the redistribution of budgets. And we are going to conclude with the last color, same color as your shoes, Judy. Strasbourg, who worked on cooperation between companies, which is based on your experience with your network. Again, Noemi has... So Strasbourg, we have going to have them on the phone. Noemi, we have 5 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. So implementing work groups to co-build, reflect around common themes to really target the requirements of the territories and the citizens, local centers for decision, local permanent network, make sure that the stakeholders of the economy gather around user-friendly events, also having consistent best practices, mapping out, structuring, developing clusters and company clubs in the spirit of a community of destiny. How do you write that? How is there a methodology? What can you tell us about this? Is there a methodology to write, to design the community of destiny of a territory with all the stakeholders and the companies, including the companies?
I think that cooperation is key to this movement. And what interests me are the ways in which companies cooperate with each other, oftentimes using each other's waste, creating a reciprocity and a giving and a taking. An example of this is I have a friend that has a seed company, and he sells organic seeds from squash and tomatoes and whatnot. And when he extracts the seeds from the vegetables, he throws the fruit or vegetables, into a pile, into the compost. And so then he was sharing beers with a friend that made soup, and then they realized that the guy who made soup could use the fruits and vegetables to make soup from. And another example is fry oil, like restaurants that use vegetable oil to fry potatoes and so on. Then it goes into the waste, where one of our farmers started picking up the used fry oil and using it to heat his house. And then he ended up running his whole farm on used fry oil from the restaurants, heating his greenhouses, running his tractor, heating his house, and so on. And so there's so many examples of those small companies, say, for instance, coffee companies that are competing with Starbucks. How can they do things cooperatively to have more economy of scale? One of the things they did was to print coffee cups. To print coffee cups with your logo, you have to order like 1 million of them or something. So the small companies could not afford that, but what they did was put their all the different logos, like maybe 4 or 5 different coffee companies put the logos on the cup together so they could afford to print these. So I think, these are really, to me, these are really exciting examples of cooperation and how small companies can compete and have economy of scale.
Strasbourg, si vous êtes en ligne, alors on a à l'écran une...
Strasbourg, we have a picture of how it happened in Strasbourg. A quick compliment. We are listening. Well, not easy to summarize because my Strasbourg friends here, we had inspiring speakers. I'd like to thank you for having organized keynote speeches like this one. The 3 ideas that have come out of Strasbourg, as you mentioned, the first one is to better know each other through a number of testimonies. We are talking about people here, and all these, we're talking about the better knowledge, mapping out the players, the clusters and work groups and co-working spaces that encourage this. And we're very happy to continue on this in Strasbourg because we'll be working in smaller workshops around local synergy, such as the synergy as part of an eco-industry for the port of Strasbourg, or the creation of a territory startup policy. The second aspect I'd like to highlight is how fun this event is. We are a region of beer and wine here, so no competition between the territories. So people get to know each other. And the third aspect was the common values or common interest, a community of destiny that you actually, it is something that really struck me with, for me and for us here in Strasbourg, a change that will be global and shared with the climate change. And that's it. Anyway, we are all in the same boat on this planet. And just for this, we must have at least this destiny in common. A big thank you to Strasbourg. So enjoy your afternoon together. Philippe Vasseur, and comment and a conclusion with this last intervention. I think that we're all in the same boat. Let us hope it will not be a Noah's Ark. If you don't know the biblical reference, the Noah's Ark is during the deluge. We put representatives of each species, male and female, on a boat to ensure the survival of the species. I'm saying this because being on the same boat is not to say that let's survive, but it is to know what our common destiny is. I like this concept of a community of destiny. We're not here in a community where we say, let's fight depending on our interests. Regardless of our actions, and let's not say that the company is responsible for everything. We are all responsible. But if you like this sentence of by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, it says that we are alone responsible for everyone. So each of us in our personal actions is responsible for the whole of the community. That's what community of destiny is. It's everyone takes part in it, and everyone should be concerned. This is what we try to do. It's not easy. I notice that very often there are march for climate, and they're going to sign a petition, and then we will go home. So we'd like to create this movement of responsibility in a region which has its own history, and make sure that this territory says that we have a common destiny, and we can contribute to it. There is work, and we should not despair because we're here today. Since you're going in that field of biblical and references, the closing of this World Forum will be ensured by Yann Arthus Bertrand, because this week there was a great interview by Yann Arthus Bertrand, and he demonstrated the transitions will be spiritual as well. So a big thank you and a big round of applause to our three keynote speakers. And thank you very much. Do not forget, we'll give you, so starting at 2:30, the two international conferences, companies and territories and transition, and the other one, entrepreneurs in socio-economic transition. And at 4 o'clock here, the Hauts-de-France with World 3, Year 5. We have a lot of action, more than 1,200 demonstrators, and we'll tell you about this under the eye of the Commission. And bon appétit, everyone.